It's UFC 318 fight week. Poirier versus Holloway again. Yeah, I guess. I've seen a lot of videos. I'm sure that you guys have seen a lot of videos of people ranting about how f***ing awful this card is. It's not just this card. They've given up. They don't care anymore. I've been an MMA fan for a while, and I thought back to some of the older cards, and I was like, there's no way it used to be this bad. There's no way that they just didn't give a fuck. That's not possible, right? I'm going to give you guys a handful of cards. I'm going to go back to UFC 205. Still modern era, kinda, not really, but the McGregor era. UFC 205. We had Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez, Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Thompson, Joanna Jędrzejczyk against, who cares? But anyways, Joanna and Jędrzejczyk, that's a big draw. Chris Weidman versus Yoel Romero, Miesha Tate versus Raquel Pennington, Frankie Edgar versus Jeremy Stevens, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Michael Johnson, Vicente Luque versus Bilal Muhammad. This is on one card. And by the way, I just got to the early prelims reading this. Jim Miller was on the early prelims. The legend Jim Miller. Fast forward about 100 UFC pay-per-views to UFC 306, UFC Noche, Once in a Lifetime, at the Sphere. Dana White's like, yeah, we're putting like $800 million into this thing. It's gonna be awesome. People who show up they're gonna remember this till the day they die. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Khabib Nurmagomedov was on the prelims of UFC 205. Ode Osborne and Ronaldo Rodriguez were the main card opener of UFC Noche. The once in a lifetime, one card ever at the Sphere. They were on the main card. Ode Osborne and Ronaldo Rodriguez were on a once in a lifetime main card. We cannot be serious. That's just one example, okay? That was just UFC 205. I'm going to keep going. UFC 217, Bisping versus GSP, Garbrandt versus Dillashaw, Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Rose Namajunas, Stephen Thompson versus Jorge Masvidal, Johnny Hendricks versus Paulo Costa. It kind of goes downhill after that. But we had Randy Brown versus Mickey Gall. That's a sick fight. Ovince St. Preux versus Corey Anderson. Ayman Zahabi was on there. Curtis Blades was on there on the early prelims. Ion Cutelaba versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk was supposed to happen on that card. Fast forward one UFC pay-per-view, UFC 218, Aldo versus Holloway. We had Alistair Overeem versus Francis Ngannou, Henry Cejudo versus Sergio Pettis, Eddie Alvarez versus Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira versus Paul Felder. And again, I'm going into the prelims for this with big names. Dominic Reyes is in the early prelims. UFC 226, Cormier versus Miocic, Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis, Paul Felder versus Mike Perry, Michael Chiesa versus Anthony Pettis, Khalil Roundtree's on this card, Paulo Costa's on this card, Rafael Assunção, when he was cool, was on this card, Rob Font's on this card. Dan Hooker is on the early prelims with Gilbert Burns. Ode Osborne and Ronaldo Rodriguez were on the main card of a once-in-a-lifetime pay-per-view. UFC 317, its International Fight Week, comes once a year. Peyton Talbot, coming off a loss, opening up the main card. What happened? And I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep reading names. I don't care. You can skip through this for all I care. But I'm going to keep reading. UFC 229, Khabib versus Conor. Tony Ferguson versus Anthony Pettis. OSP versus Dominic Reyes, Derek Lewis versus Volkov, which was a sick fight, by the way. Vicente Luque versus Jalen Turner. UFC 249, Anthony Pettis versus Donald Oh, I just started on the prelims. Jesus Christ. Tony Ferguson versus Gaethje, Henry Cejudo, Dominic Reyes, Francis Ngannou versus Rosenstrike, Calvin Kattar, Jeremy Stevens, Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone, Alexei Oleinik when he was cool versus Fabricio Verdum, who was kind of on the back end of his career. It doesn't matter. Carla Esparza. I don't know if I should put that in there, but we will. Vicente Luque on this card. Bryce Mitchell and Ryan Spann, and the legend Sam Alvey. One of the greatest to ever do it, Sam Alvey, was on the early prelims. The disrespect to Sam Alvey. UFC 251, Kamaru Usman, Jorge Masvidal, Volk versus Holloway, Piotr Jan versus Jose Aldo, Rose Namajunas, Jessica Andrade, Paige Van Zandt. I mean, who cares for her fighting ability, but she's hot, so.
I want mommy, I want milk, I want to be held, I want to be comforted.
Yuri Prohaska is on the prelims of UFC 251, which he fought Volkan Oezdemir and knocked him out cold. It was awesome. Marcin Tybura is on the early prelims. The legend Davy Grant, who's one of the most underrated fighters on the roster. That's some ball knowledge for you. If you want to sound like a hardcore, that's what you say. Davy Grant is one of the most underrated fighters on the roster. Anyways, moving on from that. UFC 267, we had Glover Teixeira versus Jan Blachowicz, Piotr Jan versus Corey Sandhagen, Islam Makhachev versus Dan Hooker, Alexander Volkov versus Marcin Tybura, Khamzat Chimaev versus Li Jingliang, Magomed Ankalaev versus Volkan Oezdemir. That kind of goes downhill after that. We had Benoit on that card. We had Mikhail Oleksiejczuk on that card. We had Laverne Murphy on that card. Andre Petrosky. It was okay. It was a good card. UFC 268. This is one of the most stacked cards I've ever seen. Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington. I believe this was the second one. Rose Namajunas versus Weili Zhang. Frankie Edgar, Marlon Vera, Shane Burgos, I guess. He was cool at the time. Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, Alex Pereira. I think this was his debut fight. He was on the prelims. Bobby Green, Ali Aquinta. Ali Aquinta was still, I guess, relevant at the time. Chris Curtis was on the card. Nasruddin Imavov versus Edmund Shabazian opened up the prelims. Ian Gary was on the early prelims at the time. That was a sick KO, though. Chris Barnett, I guess. I don't know. Kind of goes downhill after that. But Ode Osborne was the opening fight of this fucking card. Fast forward a few years, Ode Osborne's opening up a main card. It's like, oh, did Ode Osborne win he probably won a bunch of fights in a row, right? He fought CJ Vergara to open up an entire pay-per-view. Early prelims, first fight of the whole card. He went 2-3, and then he opened up a main card. Tell me how that makes sense, Dana. Oh, wait, you can't, because it doesn't. UFC 270. I'm going to do a couple more because I know this is getting tiresome. Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gane, Brandon Moreno, Davison Figueiredo, Mikel Pereira was on this card. Said Nurmagomedov was on this card. Michael Morales was on this card. Jack Della Maddalena was on the prelims, which, to be fair, I think that was after he had a war with Basel Lafez. Jasmine Dastavicius was the opening fight of the entire card. UFC 281. This is the last one I'm going to do. I'm sorry. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. Carla Esparza versus Weili Zhang. Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. Frankie Edgar versus Chris Gutierrez. That was a cool fight at the time. Dan Hooker was on this card. Renato Moicano was on this card. Dominic Reyes was on this card. Aaron Blanchfield was on this card. Carlos Olberg opened the pay-per-view, dude. You want to know who opens the card at UFC 318? Carly Judas and Nicole Cagliari. I don't even know who those people are. I have to put a prediction video out about that fight. Michael Johnson in 2025. How old is Michael Johnson, by the way? Michael Johnson in 2025 is opening up a main card. He's 40. Daniel Rodriguez is in a featured fight of a pay-per-view in 2025. I'm sorry, I am bitching and moaning because we did get a good card recently. I think the last good card, some would argue 317, but I'm not a fan. I mean, look at 315. Kyle Prepolek opened the main card. Do you know who Kyle Prepolek is? Unfortunately, I do, but I guarantee you about 90% of you guys don't know who the that is. He opened the main card in 2025. You know who was opening the prelims in 2022, 2023? Jack Della Maddalena. The last good card we got was UFC 314. That card was a banger. We had Marco Tullio on the early prelims, which is sick. The point is, they don't give a anymore, dude. Nowadays, it's the UFC press conference on Thursday, and Dana White is promoting Canelo versus Crawford. This is our press conference. What the are you doing? And they don't give a they don't care. They don't care. They're gonna sell out for the oil money, and they don't give a because they put Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway as the main fight, and they think they're gonna watch it anyways. Let's put Kyle Prepolek to open the main card. Fuck it, just throw it on there. Who cares? It's Poirier versus Holloway. Who's some old that never fights? Yeah, Michael Johnson. He's been slept in like back-to-back fights really bad, right? Yeah, throw him on there. Fuck it. Throw him on the main card, too. Who are some other old washed guys? I don't know. Adam Fugit, we could get him. Who else is washed? Ryan Spann? Yeah, throw him on there. Who's another guy? Jimmy Crute? Hasn't he been finished a bunch? Yeah, throw him on there. Does it matter? Does it matter who we put on here? No, it's Poirier versus Holloway. We could the whole card up. They'll still watch it. Daniel Rodriguez, how old is he? Got to be at least 37 or 38, because we don't want to put anybody good on the card. He's 38? Cool. Put him on there. And you know what? Put him as the featured fight. Good lord. I can't do this, man. Who's another guy on this card? Isn't Marcin Prachnio on this card? Yeah, he is. He's fighting Jimmy Crute. Jesus Christ. Marcin Prachnios fighting Jimmy Crute on a pay-per-view. What the f is going on? The worst part, one of my buddies was like, dude, you excited for UFC 318 this weekend? I was like, no, of course not. Marcin Prachnios fighting Jimmy Crute, and it's a pay-per-view. I'm not excited for that shit. You think I'm excited to watch this? It's just getting embarrassing. That's the thing. Like, the casual fans, like my buddy, I would consider him, he's a casual fan. All he sees is Poirier Holloway and thinks, yeah, this is going to be awesome. And the UFC knows they can trick the people who are casual fans into watching it. And it's working. But for me, you know, this is like my life. And I have to break down every single fight. I see Carly Judas versus Nicole Cagliari opening the card. And I want to put a gun to my head. Anyways, I mean, I don't know what they're doing anymore. It's working too. That's the worst part. It's working what they're doing. Oh my God, man. What the fuck is going on? Yeah, it's UFC 318 fight week, I guess, guys. Like I said, they're selling out for the oil money and the Saudis and whatnot. Michael Johnson opens up a pay-per-view this week. So next week, it's a fight night card. It's not a pay-per-view, it's free. Shara Magomedov is opening up the main card, and then we get Bryce Mitchell versus Saeed Nurmagomedov, Piotr Jan versus Marcus McGee, Movsar versus Aaron Pico, Robert Whittaker versus Rainer de Ritter. Guess who else is on the card? Bogdan Guskov versus Nikita Krylov, Muslim Salikov versus Carlos Leal, I guess, meh. Asuel Mabaya versus Ramazan, I thought it was just Ramazan Temirov. I guess it's Ramazanbek Temirov. Anyways, the card is stacked, top to bottom. Davey Grant opens up the whole card with Damon Blackshear. It's free. Selling out for the fucking oil money. So anyways, yeah, you guys let me know what you think. I am wearing the same thing that I wore in the last video because I'm recording 2 videos and editing 2 videos in one day. We're on the grind. We're on the grind. There's going to be more videos coming out this week. I got a prediction video for this monstrosity of a card coming. I'm going to get it out by Wednesday. Yeah, man. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.